Tim Desher is Executive Director at Unleash Prosperity, and Thomas Savidge is a Research Fellow at the American Institute for Economic Research. Gentlemen, welcome on. Thomas, to you first. Do you agree with the president here that he's hurting the housing industry?
Well, yeah, from what we're seeing, it's, even in action at this point, if the Fed is behind the curve on any kind of action, it is going to affect markets. Now, while mind you that the Federal Reserve doesn't set market rates for every interest rate in the market, it does set some key benchmark rates, and that is like tossing a stone into a pond. It has ripple effects across the rest of the market. And so even inaction in this case is going to do damage.
We're also learning this as well. Tim, I'll speak to you about it, that the Trump administration is in talks with Intel to have the U.S. government potentially take a 10% stake in the chip maker. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirming the Trump administration's efforts. If you missed it, here's that.
As for this 10% government stake deal, the Department of Commerce continues to work on it. I know Secretary Lutnick is working on it and ironing out the details, but the president wants to put America's needs first, both from a national security and economic perspective. And it's a creative idea that has never been done before to ensure that we're both reshoring these critical supply chains while also gaining something of it for the American taxpayer.
So gaining something for the American taxpayer, that's interesting with the timing. SoftBank is set to make a $2 billion investment in Intel. Tim, what does this mean for the American people that are watching and seeing the U.S. government getting some sort of stake in Intel? How does that correlate to the everyday American?
Well, it has been tried before. It's been tried before in socialist, communist country after communist, socialist country. Hoxha, Tito, Stalin, all of them socialized industries, nationalize them for the national security or the betterment or the benefit of things. Now, I don't think that that's what the Trump administration is trying to do. But if you think that taking an ownership stake in a company for the long term is going to benefit that company when a far radical left-wing Democrat comes into office, I don't think that's going to happen. And all we have to do is look at the CHIPS Act that was passed by the Biden administration. They sent billions and billions of dollars to Intel. And do you know what Intel did with that money? They expanded their child care program. They did not help themselves in terms of making their company more viable and better off. So we got to be careful what we do here. You know what would be best for Intel is if the government got out of the way, cut the corporate tax rate, and encourage them to make investments. And by the way, if they refuse to make themselves better, that's on them, and other companies can come in and clean up the mess.
Thomas, President Trump has been doing so much good for the economy. It's really rebounding ever since COVID. We were going through a rough part there. Americans are going through a rough part. But when you look at where interest rates stand now, and as we move forward, heading into September, when the Fed's going to meet again to decide should they lower these rates, Americans right now, they aren't buying home. Home buying is down. Americans are now, I think, above $1.3 trillion in credit card debt. I mean, Donald Trump is doing everything he can to ease the financial burden on Americans, bringing grocery prices down, making the economy better. But at the end of the day, they're not feeling it if they're still paying off insane amounts of, interest on their credit card payments or not being able to live the American dream by buying a house.
Yeah, that's right, Christina. And, I think we saw the Fed was behind the curve on responding to inflation over the past couple of years. The Fed does not want to be behind the curve again in the need to cut rates. So this really speaks to a structural problem at the Fed that has been going on long before President Trump's first term and almost since the Fed's creation there. If the Fed has discretion like this, the entire market is standing on the tips of their toes, waiting to see what the Fed is going to do and, trying to guess what's going to be done, trying to read between the lines of various speeches, various talks, and they're hanging on every word. But what really needs to happen is for the Fed to be constrained by a strict monetary rule. Just focus on controlling the money supply, because with that, you're going to get greater predictability. And with greater predictability, you're going to get greater stability and increased opportunities for those things like reducing credit card debt and the ability to buy a home.
All right. We do appreciate that. Tim Desher, Thomas Savidge joining us here on this Wednesday. Appreciate it. Thank you.